When I was 15, I grew up in a family of 4 within a small town of central Pennsylvania. There was my father, my mother, myself, and my sister Sarah. However, Sarah wasn't your typical older sister, as she had been born with autism. While she was 21 years old at the time, she had the height, interests, and speech patterns of a very young toddler, only speaking in sparse words and grunts. Due to her complications post-birth, my sister had a particular walk, unlike anyone else's. When she moved, it sounded like someone walking with a limp, but as if they lightly slammed their feet down while they lurched. She had also developed asthma early on, but because of her mental handicap, she couldn't use an inhaler like anyone else. Instead, she had to use a pump that vaporized the albuterol so she could breathe normally. In the early morning of August 28, 2008, I was fast asleep in my bed. Just a typical day of waking up and heading to high school. However, all that changed when my mother slammed open my door and began shouting, "Donald, wake up! Sarah needs to go to the hospital!" As it turns out, Sarah had been sick the previous day. The virus had gravely contributed to her breathing problem during the night, which caused a severe asthma attack the following morning. She couldn't breathe. The albuterol didn't work. CPR didn't work. And when the ambulance finally arrived, paramedics took her away and tried to save her life. Sadly, the efforts had been too late. 2 days later, Sarah was pronounced brain dead in the hospital. And on September 1st, after everyone had come down to say their goodbyes, we pulled the plug. At her funeral later that week, we made sure to leave behind a few of her favorite toys alongside her casket, like her favorite Ernie and Elmo plushies from Sesame Street, and a train, just to name a few. However, after the funeral had ended, and her casket had been lowered into the plot, I remembered we'd forgotten one thing she was never caught without: her Connect 4 checker pieces. She always had a few in her hand, just twisting them around in her palm, clacking them together. I felt bad we'd forgotten. But what could we do? She'd already been laid to rest. It must have been only a day or two later that something happened I will never forget. It was well past midnight, and I was still awake, thanks to everything that had transpired that week. All I could do was lay there in bed, wide awake, but exhausted. There were mornings where I could just stare at the ceiling, and others where I stared at my closed bedroom door. When my eyes went to the door, my ears picked up a sound I was all too familiar with. One pair of footsteps, lightly paced, limping down the hall in front of my bedroom. The footsteps of Sarah. I froze. My eyes locked on the small crevice of light that poured from beneath the door. There, I could see a shadow. A pair of feet slowly lurching in front of my room, towards Sarah's old room close by. It couldn't have been my father, my mother, not even my dog, or the entire state of Pennsylvania for that matter, walked like her. I heard the steps continue through her open bedroom door. All I could bring myself to do was lay there and listen. For a moment, there was nothing. The walk had stopped midway through her room. There, in my chilled state, I finally mustered enough willpower to say a single word. "Sarah," I whispered. There was a response, but no words were spoken. The response I received as I lay there listening through our thin walls was the sound of checkers clacking together. Goosebumps covered my skin as the sound of her limping came back on top of the sound of the checkers being twisted and turned. The shadow of her feet returned within the light under my doorway, and I realized the noises were heading back towards our kitchen, where she used to sit and play with her toys. I don't know what possessed me, but I bolted out of my bed just to pause at the door. Slowly, I cracked it open and looked down the hallway. Only blackness shrouded the rest of our house, which should have been enough to send me back to my bed. But I had to know if it was her. I crept down the hall as slowly as I could, so I could listen to my surroundings. The walking stopped, but the checker pieces still echoed in the kitchen. I found myself next to the light switch that would lighten up the rest of our house, but I couldn't bring myself just to peer out just yet. Creeped to imagine that I might find my sister sitting there in her favorite chair, playing with her checker pieces. When I finally flipped the switch, I jumped out of the hall to see what I could, in an action of both curiosity and fear. There was nothing. No lingering spirit, nothing out of place. The sound of the checker pieces had stopped with my intrusion. Years later, I decided to tell my mom about what I heard and what I had seen that night, not knowing if she would believe my story or not. When I finished, for a moment, all she did was stare at me, before muttering the words, "You heard the checkers too?" I know it's a cliche saying with such experiences, but I have no other way of answering as to what happened that night. The only explanation that makes any sense to me, or my family, is that Sarah must have set foot in our house one last time to retrieve her forgotten toy. Hey guys, CrookedKat here. I just wanted to say thank you for checking out my videos and listening to this awesome story. If you didn't get the chance to check out my other videos, I would definitely go check it out right now. One thing before I go, I can't stress enough, make sure you guys comment. I really want to hear what you guys think about my videos and what you'd like to see in future ones so then I can make it better for everyone. I'm not great at goodbyes, so see you soon.